All right. My name's Dr. Frankie, and I'm a clinical psychologist with over 2 decades of experience. I'm also a board certified sex therapist and the CEO and founder of a matchmaking firm that's national. It's a
Whoa.
lot. That's like a mouthful.
A
It makes me feel
matchmaking
really
firm.
old.
No, that's awesome. And a
Yeah.
matchmaking firm, I feel like, goes perfectly with what we want to talk to you about today, which is relationships, specifically long-term relationships. Can we narrow down what long-term mean? Does that mean more than like a few months, more than a year? Where does long-term land?
That's so interesting because I don't even have it like it feels very arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not I think it's like it's something when I think of long term, it's you enter into a relationship with the interest and expectation of being together for a number of years or something like that. Like
Mhm.
for a
Mm-hmm.
while. It's not a casual thing like a summer fling.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That
That's what
makes
I think
sense.
about. I can't
We've
even get you can't give a number really, right? It's like, okay, we're
Right.
getting into this relationship. I want to find somebody who I can be with
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
long
you've
term.
changed mindsets now,
Mhm.
Mhm.
which I like
Yes.
because I think that will affect a lot of the questions that we want to ask later on about relationships and kind of where we get into like some ruts a little bit.
Love it. That's my wheelhouse. Give them
Amazing.
to me. Hope I can answer them and that your listeners get something out of it for sure.
I feel like we hear a lot of opinions on what long-term relationships should be like. And I think one of the things that I've heard a lot is that if you're in the right relationship, it should feel easy. Is that true? Should long-term relationships feel easy?
No,
Okay. Thank
that's a
you.
total misconception, misperception. Relationships aren't easy. I think they take work, intention, commitment. And I think where we get confused is that, like, when you think about a relationship that is kind of toxic, it feels really hard because you're having to really work on the relationship to the extent where it's like on a daily basis, you're in conflict with each other. And you're spending when you think about the ratio, the cost benefit ratio, how beneficial is this relationship? How much is this relationship really feeling good to me? And how much is it costing me to be in this relationship? If it's tipped where it's costing a lot, it's impacting your mental health, your well-being, you're spending more time disagreeing and arguing than seeking joy and laughter and fun together, right? So
Mhm.
that's really what you want to that for me it just feels like that's unhealthy work.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the flip, which is like the effort in really communicating authentically, honestly, having mutual respect for one another, not avoiding things that make us uncomfortable, where trusting that each of all of us in the relationship, because I don't want to assume it's just now with polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, you don't have to assume that it's just two people, but whoever enters the relationship, that there is the intention to work through
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and communicate. So does that seem clear?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
There's good work, and then there's work that just doesn't align with being in the right relationship. And I think I've definitely gotten confused in the past. I'm like, oh, these are just kinks you work through while you're growing together. Even though we're at each other's throats and I kind of hate you, and also I'm no longer like sexually interested in you, this is just the good work of being in this relationship. And I think it has taken me a long time to realize what actual healthy work looks like in relationships. Where that's just like overcoming communication barriers or talking about your sexual interests, things that are just like a little bit uncomfortable because you haven't been able to share them with the right person.
Absolutely. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you get it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no such thing as like an easy relationship. Because if
Mm-hmm.
it's easy, then my guess is that people are not doing the work. They're avoiding uncomfortable conversations. They may not
Mm-hmm.
be asking for what they need. So there should be work involved in your relationship if you're really interested in deepening intimacy, trust, connecting, like you want to connect on a deeper level. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be it's going to be some effort.
Yeah.
Mhm. What do you think makes long-term relationships hard? Like what are the times that effort really needs to be put forth?
And here again is like, what's long term, right?
Mhm.
So I think relationships get more difficult when we really know each other. And it takes a few years to really like see each other's less sparkly facets. It's like we're made up like a diamond, right? We've got all these facets,
Mhm.
and many of the facets are sparkly and wonderful, but there are going to be some facets that have carbon in them.
Mhm.
We have imperfections. So it could take a couple years before you actually see, like, we have to, where we see these imperfections, because situations, life circumstances have to present themselves so that we can observe one another in difficult situations that life throws at us, because it will. It's a matter of time for those curveballs to come our way, for the monkey wrenches to come. It's part of living this life.
Mhm.
And you want to see how your person reacts. How do they regulate? How do they treat other, people around them? How do they treat themselves when there's crisis? So it takes a bit of time
Mhm.
to really get to know all the facets of your
Mhm.
person.
Mhm.
When you're met with meeting those challenges differently, does that mean that I mean, I guess what does that mean when you meet moments of crisis or maybe one of you loses a job and you kind of spiral differently? How would you start approaching that hard moment? Does that mean I don't know, you're not in the right relationship or with the right person, or is that just more work?
It really, I mean, it's just more work recognizing,
Mhm.
okay, well, I regulate this way.
Mhm.
Like, I'll use myself for an example. Like, I will, when I get stressed, I'll go to the gym and I'll make a call to a friend, or I'll tap into my resources to help me regulate and work through. But some of us go inward, right? And
Mhm.
we may not reach out for support. We may get depressed, really anxious. So if somebody's, in a relationship with another that doesn't really have great coping skills, for example, and they're not able to regulate so well, it's up to us to figure out, okay, well, how can we best support our person, our
Mhm.
partner, while also taking care of ourselves, while also being mindful not to overstep, like not to behave in a codependent way, which
Mhm.
is like where you're just sacrificing yourself
Mhm.
in an attempt to save another person, where you like let go of your needs to save the person, the relationship, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it kind of depends to what extent. And
Mhm.
I think when we're in a committed relationship, we are committing to being there even in the tough times. It's not just for the fun times. And
Mhm.
this is barring physical abuse, right?
Mhm.
Sexual abuse, verbal abuse. That's like full stop, unacceptable, right? Like, you
Mhm.
probably need to exit stage left, likely
Mhm.
for safety. But
Mhm.
otherwise, you gotta, yeah, figure out, how can I support my partner? How can we
Mhm.
work together? Like, we don't have to go out this at this alone. We're in it,
Mhm.
we're a team.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So communication, 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 really. Yeah.
Are there any general misconceptions that you see about long-term relationships that you want to dispel?
Yeah, I think people think of like the biggest challenges being like sex, bed death. That it's just in a long term relationship, it's like eating the same meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're just like, ugh, I'm tired of eating this, and then your love life, your sex life just goes completely flat.
Mhm.
I want to dispel that. I think it's like anything else; you have to work at it. You
Mhm.
have to
Mhm.
keep it interesting, exciting, stay open, be curious, and have conversations about it.
Mhm.
Um, what else? I think that just because people enter into a monogamous relationship initially doesn't mean that down the line they can't reevaluate and decide to open the relationship up. Like, I have couples that come to me because I'm very sex positive, like I've worked with many poly couples, individuals, people who decide they want to open things up. And that's possible if both people are really like supportive of each other, they are taking care of themselves and they get the right support from a professional. If it's the first time they're doing this, it helps to have somebody like me, like a coach or a psychologist, to help them through and figure out, because a lot of fears come up around that. So that's a misconception, the idea that like if you enter into a monogamous relationship, you can't redefine or change the structure of that relationship.
Mhm.
Geez, I can probably think of many, but I don't there's a couple.
No,
I
those
like
are
those
pretty.
ones.
Absolutely. Because I think the sex one comes up most commonly. And I've, in almost every relationship I've been in that's lasted longer than a year or I've moved in with them, we've hit that hurdle of our sex is stale now. And I think we get really caught up in like, this is what happens in long term relationships. And we have to be okay with that. And of course, through this podcast, I've learned more about like getting tools together. But when that does come up, but that happens almost every time where I feel like we kind of get a little lazy and let the spice fall away once other hurdles start coming into the relationship. Like once we kind of pass that honeymoon phase. And I don't want that to happen in future relationships. Like I'd love to avoid that. Um, yeah.
Because that's going to happen. Life is going to happen. Like
Right.
circumstances are going to come up and that are going to pull you away. And that if you allow it, it'll start to envelop you. It'll take away your
Mm-hmm.
attention. It'll create anxiety, sometimes sadness, depression, grief, right? We have loss in life. So you've got to really come back to, okay, I need to make sure to be attending and nurturing my relationship while also grieving